Hi, I'm Rina, and welcome to the Lessons from Post-Exit Entrepreneurs. After selling my brand communications agency, I started getting questions from people about the process of selling the company. Fellow entrepreneurs who exited their businesses also shared about their post-exit experiences. I thought about how great it would be if these conversations with such valuable insights could be shared with others too. Therefore, I launched this podcast where you will get the lowdown from entrepreneurs' collective insights in exiting their businesses, learn from their post-exit challenges, be inspired by their journeys, and their rediscovery in the pursuit of a purposeful life. Hi guys! Today my guest is Michael Lin. He's a multi-exit entrepreneur and the managing director of Auston Institute, an engineering school across 3 countries, Singapore, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar. Thank you for coming on to the show, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so my voice today, I'm not sure if you can hear it. It sounds a little bit more sexy. Just pardon me, I think I'm having a bit of a sore throat or hoarse voice. So let's start. So Michael, you said before that you're an accidental entrepreneur. Could you share a little bit of that journey, how you came to be running Auston Institute?
Yeah, so I mean, it was a family investment, and at the time, they needed someone to run it, and that was me.
You were arrowed.
I was arrowed to start. Yeah, not something that I thought of the idea and started from scratch. So in that sense, I was accidentally put into this business ownership perspective.
Yeah. So how did that feel like? I mean, for entrepreneurs, I mean, of course, everybody's journey is different. For some people, they intentionally set out to start a company. For you, you're kind of like, go do it, right? So, I mean, what was that journey like? Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, it's not something that I thought about when I took over the business. But like anyone who's in family business, you will learn that when the family invests money, you're not supposed to lose it. And so if I'm in charge,
That's even more stressful, right? It's not like your own money per se, it's your family's money.
That's right, yeah. So things only go up from there. That's the expectation.
Okay,
Yeah.
Wow, so I can't really imagine how it must have been like, because it's your first time running a business and you were just kind of thrown into it. So what was the state of the company, the school, like when you first took over?
I mean, when we took over the business, it was huge. It had all these faculties, lots of staff, lots of different projects and things going all over the world. And I think at least for me, I thought I wanted to get the basics right first before we expand overseas. So we pulled back a lot of those operations. I think that was the first thing I did. Yeah.
Why did you decide to do that? And I mean, what gave you the idea that that's actually what you needed to do? And how did you decide what to focus on?
Yeah, I think maybe because this was the early 2000s, I think the thinking back then was a little bit different than it is now. Back then, I thought a lot of maybe getting everything in your own house in order first before you go abroad. And then as compared to now where it's all like this raise big capital, fail fast kind of method. So back then I just felt that everything I inherited was a little bit messy, and I wanted to make sure that I could see things clearly, so that when I multiplied, I know that 2 times 2 is 4, as opposed to multiplying and then saying I'm not quite sure what the result's going to be.
And do you remember what were some of the key changes, how you streamlined the business and how you decided what was best for the business going forward?
Well, no one really knows what's best for the business going forward.
It's just the best you know at that time.
Yeah. We make the best decisions at that point in time. One thing that we did quite concretely was after probably about 4 or 5 years of running the business, I decided together with the management team to streamline our product offering from many different faculties down to just one sort of core faculty, which is engineering and tech. And this was again early 2000s. or mid 2000s, where we make that decision, and turned out to be the right one. It did benefit a lot of people.
And was there a reason why you chose engineering amongst the other faculties?
Yeah, so when we look at the engineering, well, the education business, primarily you're trying to help people get better employment.
Yeah.
In some cases, it's just credentialing, but here we just want to help people get a better employment. And so we look at the outcomes of the students from different faculties, business, hospitality, accountancy, you name it. And engineering and tech, those grads always typically had
more prospects.
A lot of prospects, yeah. Very close to 100% employment rate, large increments, lots of job satisfaction.
Right.
So we thought that makes sense to have a segment that we should go chase.
Yeah, all right. And you subsequently moved out of Singapore. Yeah. So could you share with us a bit of that journey? It's always a little bit scary, and uncertain when you go into a new territory. You don't know the country, you don't know the people. How did you go about deciding which country to go into? And what were some of the challenges that you faced? Yeah.
So, we talking for days about international expansion, but just talking about the opportunities that we did pursue. Obviously, as a service provider, you want to attract overseas business.
Yeah.
So we attracted overseas students to come to Singapore, and we had huge numbers of students from China, India, and a few other countries. And what we thought was that trying to tackle China would be a very, very large project, and probably not the first internationalization project you should embark on. Same thing with India, huge countries, huge market. But we also saw that we had a lot of students coming to us from smaller markets like Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Myanmar, Indonesia. And so we thought we should try and explore those countries. We did explore many of them, but the two of them that had the highest prospect, ease of operating, getting us into the market, was Sri Lanka and Myanmar. And so that's where we started, these two countries.
Did you get any sort of maybe government support, or was it connections through friends to find out this information from these countries to know which ones made more sense to go into first?
So the first one that we went to was Sri Lanka, and that one we just went all in on our own. And that turned out to be a really bad idea. Remember, when you go there, you're a foreigner in a foreign country. The laws, you will get the short end of the stick of all laws and deals and all that kind of stuff. And because you have this confirmation bias, right? You're going into a new place to find opportunities. Everything's going to look sexy to you, and then you go in and you grab all the wrong opportunities, and you just hurt yourself along the way. It didn't turn out all that bad. Along the way, we found very good local friends. The key word here being local, understand how to navigate these things, and then they help bring you back some sanity.
All right. And so was having these local friends part of that journey or learning as well, when you try to ensure the quality of delivery, the SOPs are the same as with Singapore? I mean, the staff are different culture, the customers are of a different culture.
So I think the way I see this now is that obviously we have the way we operate in Singapore, and we try and bring this overseas.
Just force it down their throat.
Force it down the throat. Like, this is how Singapore expects you to do it. But then you realize that actually Singapore is the outlier, not the norm. And so the efficiency,
in what sense?
the efficiency, the operations, what we expect in terms of performance in Singapore is very different from what you get abroad. And so we can use the Singapore SOPs to bring in there. It helps with the branding and getting everything started. It gives everyone a nice platform to start on. But if you really want to scale overseas, you need to deviate from this expectation that everything is going to be square like Singapore is. And I think that was a big change that had to be
like a culture shock, right?
And you gotta adjust to that quickly. You can't wait too long to adjust. But also going in with no SOPs is also the wrong idea. So it's a mix of the two, and it's down to the individual business owners sort of sense of timing that, okay, I think the Singapore SOPs are only going to get us to this stage.
Yeah.
Now we got to go beyond that when you think about something else.
So then there are a lot of nuances also to kind of decide at what point do you let go and what are some of the things that you have to insist upon despite the socio cultural differential in perspectives, right?
Yeah. I think so that's where the local shareholders or local directors really come in
will
handy.
give their advice.
And they can tell you that if you want to stick by these very strict Singapore-like rules,
It's not going to work out.
it's not going to work. You will attract a segment of the market, but you won't attract enough to get your critical mass. And so then how do you do it? Do you build alternative product offerings? Do you build a sub-brand, some way to manage these people, this different segment? Or would you just have an entire different risk management system to balance out the deviations you're making from your operations?
Right. And when you set up these two entities, so there were Sri Lanka and Myanmar, and of course you started with Singapore. Were they subsidiaries of a parent group or were they individual entities? And what were the considerations behind, the option you went for in the end?
So there were two options. Obviously, you do it as a subsidiary or you do it with common shareholders. So same shareholding structure as Singapore, just in a foreign land. And if you make it as a subsidiary, depending on what your audit requirements are, if you own the subsidiaries, you have to do consolidated accounts, which means then you've got to do accounts in those countries and consolidate by Singapore. It puts a whole lot of pressure on you. Alternatively, you do it as common shareholding, and then when the time is right, then you can swap that in. So the Singapore company makes a loan to the shareholder here, the shareholder then invests it abroad, and then at some point you do a back-to-back transaction and then you consolidate up. That's a nice, that would be the preferred method. And then what you would have is you buy yourself about 2-3 years to get the books in order, get systems in place, nice profitability, and then you consolidate up, and it makes the Singapore story more attractive. But considering this is about post-exit, you have to consider who's going to acquire you. If you're building it to sell, is your potential buyer somebody who wants this network, or they just want very specific markets?
They may not want to buy the entire
Exactly.
group.
Okay. And so when we first set out thinking to build this to sell, the thought was someone's going to buy the whole network. And so more campuses abroad, etc., would be more attractive for the buyer. Obviously, as we went along, we realized that each market has its own set of buyers. Someone for a Singapore buyer, Myanmar buyer, Sri Lanka buyer. So it's not the same.
And they may not necessarily be interested with the entire group, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And that's really interesting also. I think many times as a seller, right, we have certain ideas about what the potential buyer might want. But when you set out to really sell, it could be a completely different story, right? So which branch was the one that you first sold, and at which point did you decide that this might be the time for me to sell? And why did you decide to do so?
So like just like the SOPs, right? Your Singapore-based SOPs are only going to get you so far. I think likewise for all the campuses, I felt there was only a certain place that I could take it to, and beyond that, someone else would have to take over. Could have been a foreigner, could have been a local, but someone needed to have that motivation, that vision of what it could be beyond this, and then the know-how to get it executed on the ground. And so I think the first one to go was Sri Lanka. Partially it was that I felt I could take it only from 0 to 1, someone else had to take it from 1 to 10. And secondly, that post-COVID, since all transactions happened immediately after COVID, it was a realization of what I could achieve living remotely from the actual campus.
It's such a humbling perspective as well when you shared, and also I think another one of my guests also said the same thing. As a founder, we don't always have to take that stand that you would have to be the one to start from day one and take it all the way to number 100, right? You could be there along the journey at a certain point, and then thereafter let it go to somebody else whom you think will be able to take it further to another level. Yeah. So, and how did you find that first buyer?
The first buyer was through our local directors. They knew other people who were very interested in the business, and it was a fairly simple decision to say, like, you've been asking about this business for so long, how would you like to invest in it? And we took a bit of due diligence, some exchanging some financial projections, and then I think the whole deal was done in about a year and a half.
Okay. And then after that first sale, Myanmar was the second one.
Yeah, I think again it was about realizing that I think beyond this we don't add a lot of value to the organization, but there is someone else who has that value to add. In that case, we realized that it was the majority shareholder. They were existing shareholders, but if they had the full control of the business, they could do a lot more and it would just be less hassle. So yeah, I think that was the second transaction. It was well timed, and they've really grown the business since, so that's good for them.
So it sounded like the first sale and the second one where you let the majority shareholder take over is slightly different model. But was there anything that you learned from selling the Indian or rather the Sri Lanka one, and then subsequently the Myanmar one, that you could ensure consistency or learnings that you made sure were applied in the second sale, or it was just completely so different that there was no relevancy at all?
Yeah, the two transactions were totally different.
All right.
Totally different backgrounds. Yeah.
Okay, and then finally it was Singapore, right? How did you then set out to sell Singapore, and how did it feel different, right? You already sold two, and then would it be like, well, this is just the third one, I've already done it twice before? Yeah.
So when we were preparing to sell, after Sri Lanka was sold as a non-related Singapore business, it was sold as a separate entity. This whole idea of selling as a network kind of realized that it's not going to work, right? And so it made sense that we separate the two entities as well. And so when Myanmar was sold, then Singapore was kind of in isolation. Once those three were three separate entities, they ultimately got named slightly differently. And that made me realize that, well, whoever's going to buy Singapore now no longer is looking for a network. If they're looking for a school, there are many other countries that have a more interesting education investment than Singapore. So why would they buy this?
Yeah.
And then once you get that angle and you understand why someone would buy this entity, then it's much easier to find your buyers.
And then how did you set out to find out what is that point, that important thing that a buyer would want? Was it with the help of like a M&A broker, or it was just based on what you understand about the industry?
I mean, ultimately we use the broker in the end, but before that, it's like marketing. You got to pitch yourself, and as you pitch, then you get appointments, and then in the appointments you do your sales pitch, and then you get feedback from your potential customers, what they like, what they don't like, which part they walked away from. Lots of testing, lots of reading the buyers, and at that point, we realized there were certain motivations why certain groups of people would want to buy this business, and that's when then we narrowed down. We told the broker, this is the segment that we want to get. Right.
Would you be comfortable to share, like, for an educational institute? I think I think there are all sorts of educational institution. You could even be talking about, say, like a tuition center or a music school. Even they are all considered in the educational space, right? So if someone is in the same sort of space, looking to sell in the near future term, what sort of things are important to a buyer for this industry? Yeah. Is it the number
think-
of students? Is it the reputation?
Those are soft indicators.
Yeah.
I think the way I saw it was how reliable is this business for it to continue performing the way it has been performing in the past.
Yeah.
So if you show 5 years of a $10 profit, then maybe the buyer could feel convinced that you will continue to provide this $10 profit every year. Conversely, if you've shown losses in the last 4 years, and in the 5th year suddenly there's a $10 profit, then there's a question of what the next year will look like. So I think the thing that adds most to the value of the business is the ability for that business to continue performing what it was doing before. Systems, processes, digitalization of your systems, reducing the reliability of humans. I would say those would be the key things that give them that comfort.
That lowers the manpower operational cost as well, right?
I mean that improves the profitability.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
also if a system runs it, anyone who comes in can look at the system and understand that, well, these steps sort of follow each other.
Yeah.
And so that there's no need for them to be worried about institutional knowledge being lost once you leave the company. But also I think if let's say I ran a school that has 5 years of profits, and typically a student, the customer lifetime with the business is about 5 years, then the buyers can look at that and say reliably, I could give you a 5 times earnings kind of valuation, plus any sort of assets and goodwill and stuff that you may have. So if the longest stream of education is K to 12, right? So you have like kindergarten 1, 2, and then all the way to grade 12, so you got 14 years. And if you were producing, let's say, a $10,000 profit on a K to 12 institution, then you could say that you could multiply that by 14 and give you a hypothetical valuation of what.
And that's the baseline, without everything else that you said.
Without everything
goodwill
else.
or any special accreditation that might be very hard for a school to garner.
Yeah. I mean, if you imagine I'm trying to sell you a restaurant with no alcohol license, and then a restaurant with alcohol license, there's definitely going to be a higher value in there.
All right. And you got an M&A broker. Did you also get a lawyer?
I would have gotten a lawyer if the sale and purchase was particularly complex. But in this case, what I opted for was a no earnout, no backloading of any of the sale, because most of my good friends rarely survive the earnout.
Yeah.
So
I've heard many bad stories too.
I didn't want to inflate a sale price just to ruin the relationship between myself and the buyer.
Yeah. So then the broker was sufficient enough to give whatever advice you needed. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, brokers, sometimes the middleman brokers, they don't act for either party. Sometimes they act for both you and
but this was someone that you engaged yourself, so
someone else familiar with,
helping you. Yeah.
But I mean, at the end of the day, a great place to find brokers would be people who already provide service within the industry, because then they have some benchmark. In this case, it was a service provider who continued to serve the business after I left.
All right. Okay. And for your broker, was there any advice that they have given that you felt were so instrumental and important, and maybe they gave you some advice for certain things that you would never have thought of?
I think most of the scenarios between myself and buyers had panned out in my head at that point, because I've done it a few times too. I've been looking for a while, so I guess it's maybe just the possible scenarios, saying that you may not hit your reserve price. If
It's kind of like managing your expectations,
Yes,
which is also very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's so much emotional attachment to the business, and then
course.
you're trying to narrow it down to just a dollar figure, and this dollar figure, it's hard to conceptualize what your life would be like once this piece of your entire identity has been removed. And so typically you would underprice what the post-exit feels like. So you'd be like, oh yeah, once I've sold this, I'll be over the moon. You will be over the moon, but you've never been over the moon before, so you don't know what that feels like.
There's an interesting perspective, yeah.
And then you're only overpricing all the pre-stuff, like how hard I've worked in the business in all these years, which honestly the buyer doesn't care about. They're buying an entity for continuity.
Yeah. And so were there, you mentioned also, like, other than you were thinking about this for some time before you got the broker, I'm sure you spoke to some friends who have already sold. Did you hear any horror stories or very good advice that they've given you that you have taken note and made sure that you don't repeat the same mistakes when you were selling your own?
I think some of the best advice was similar to what I just said, that you don't dream about what you're going to do after you exit, right?
Not yet, at least.
Yeah, not yet, right? Like when you get there, then you'll know what you need to do. But if you haven't gotten to that point, then don't dream that. Everyone goes to the casino thinking that, oh man, if I win this, right, I'm going to buy this. So I think along that same vein, like, you just need to focus on what's one or maybe two steps in front of you. We could see the 3, 4, 5 steps and dream what that could be, but realistically, we only need to focus on the immediate steps. And in that case, it's getting the ship in order, making sure you sell correctly, making sure you hand over correctly. You don't want to dump anything off to anyone that's going to be a toxic situation.
You'll come back and bite you later on as well, even if you do that. So dovetailing to the next question then, interesting what your friend said about don't think too much about what you want to do later on. And now that you have gone through that phase, why do you think they say that? Like, some people may feel, you should have a plan. What are you going to do next, right? So why do you think that advice was given?
After you sell, before you sell, you can always dream about what's going to happen afterwards. But once you actually sell, all the feelings are going to be totally different. And so don't plan too far ahead. Just focus on getting what needs to be done next. Get that part done. Then you can focus on the next thing when you get to it, because your priorities will shift and different ideas and different things will pop up at that point.
And maybe kind of like let the dust settle first, and then when the time comes, you'll kind of know what you want to do.
Yeah, definitely want to let the dust settle. I mean, lots of things happen in that transaction stage, in the handover stage.
So how did you feel after you sold then? This is a business that you may not have started it, but you took over and you have been managing it for like 14, 15, 16 years. What were the emotions? Did they surprise you?
There's in post-sale, there's definitely like a sense of emptiness, right? That you feel like, this thing that you've grown for so long is no longer part of you. There is this frustration of handover, that you've kind of gone from the high of selling and relinquishing all this responsibility to now as a drop off to like you actually have to do work now, and you're not being well compensated for it.
All right. So I'd like to end off our session with some quick fire round questions, and you could answer them in 1 or 2 sentences. Short sentences. Best advice you have been given about running a business?
Don't do things that lose you money.
What's the biggest myth about your industry?
Very easy to make money. 30 students sitting in the class, and you only have to pay 1 teacher in front.
What was the one thing your business had that contributed to the sale?
I had built robots over 2 years. 2 years preceding the sale, I built robots that would run most of the business operations. And I think that provided a lot of consistency and reliability for the buyers.
Top thing to consider when selling a business?
How the story of how you sell what you're doing now in this business is going to contribute to your next story, if you have next story. If not, you're going to retire, then you don't have to think about anything.
Biggest myth about selling a company?
That you sign a check and then you sail into the sunset. It never works that way. There's a lot of pain between signing that document and sailing away.
Awesome. All right. So how can our listeners reach out to you if they would like to connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very responsive on there. Or you can email me at mike@automationmike.com.
Awesome. I hope you find something that you're so passionate about that you wouldn't mind going through the pain all over again.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much once again for your time, Michael. It's been awesome speaking to you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so thank you guys for your time, for tuning in once again. If you like this episode, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and review. Thanks again. We'll see you at the next episode. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have enjoyed the episode. If you have, please consider hitting subscribe, like, and comment on whichever platform you are listening from. Do also share with anyone whom you think will find this useful. I would also love to hear from you. Do let me know what are some of your key takeaways from this episode and any feedback or suggestions you may have. Do follow us on Instagram at Post-Exit Entrepreneurs for latest updates. I look forward to learning and growing with you through this podcast. I'll see you on the next episode. Bye!